from Independence, Missouri, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. You can support GovLove by becoming a member of ELGL. Check us out online at elgl.org. I'm Lauren Palmer, partner and co-founder with EverStrive Solutions, and your host for this episode. Today, my guest is Tim Blakesley, the City Administrator of Plymouth, Wisconsin. Tim is going to share with us the story of the Real Icetown, a public-private partnership that, let's just say, encountered some ups and downs. Tim is going to share the lessons he learned, and listeners, he has some great suggestions that you can apply for similar community projects in your organizations. Tim, welcome to GovLove.
Hi, Lauren. Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's great to join you today, and I hope you had a Happy New Year.
I did have a Happy New Year, thanks. I know you had a Happy New Year since you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan.
Yeah, no complaints. It was a nice Rose Bowl victory, and we'll see how they can do the rest of the year.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm so glad you could join us today for this conversation. We can't wait to hear your story. But first, let's get started with our signature lightning round just to get to know you a little bit better. So to start, what's the most interesting thing you have read or watched recently? And the Ohio State football game at the Rose Bowl does not count.
Oh, geez. All right, no Ohio State. All right, so you've ruled out 90% of my options, but I did recently read a book called 1776 by David McCullough, which is, I would say, sort of an engaging and manageable history of the first year of the Revolutionary War. I'm not a huge history buff, but I recently read it, and it was a very quick and enjoyable read.
I've never heard anyone describe David McCullough as a manageable read.
No, that's a good point. I did read his John Adams biography, and that was very detailed, very interesting, and totally worth going through. But this one was quick, so highly recommended if you've got a chance.
Okay, I think that's a good recommendation. Tim, and our listeners will remember that I live in Independence, Missouri. I'm a big Harry Truman file, and of course, David McCullough's book on Truman is like, the definitive word on all things Harry Truman. So I love that book, but I haven't read his other things. So that's a good reminder for me to get after it and study some history. All right, next lightning round question for you. What's your go-to comfort food?
So I would say barbecued pulled pork sandwich and mac and cheese, and certainly miss the Kansas City area for that.
Oh, yes. I was just about to say, you came to the right place in Kansas City. People will find out in the rest of our conversation that we used to work together here in the region. You're up in Wisconsin now, so come back anytime when you want the good stuff.
We've got a lot of cheese up here, but the barbecue is that's something that we have to visit Kansas City for.
Oh, good. But I bet you do have us beat in the mac and cheese category. Awesome. Okay, and then final question. What's a fun fact about you that not many people would know?
Sure. So I would say one fun fact is at one point I ran a municipal tennis league and a municipal bocce ball league.
That is interesting. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So when I was starting my public career in the public sector, I was initially going into sports administration, and I got an internship, and that was a sports administration internship, which was just totally interesting, and worked with basketball and all sorts of other sports, but I thought the most interesting ones was the tennis and the bocce ball league. And I'll tell you what, the bocce ball folks got really competitive. And this was in an era before pickleball really took off. So this bocce ball league was pretty fun.
I did not remember this about your background, Tim. I could do a deep dive on this and it would totally distract us from the rest of our conversation today. But do you have just like one good story you could share about that time, or just something that really stands out to you that you learned from that experience?
I think from the bocce ball league, just getting started, it was a great way to meet just totally different segments of people, right? You've got your older folks who are retired. You had some young folks in this bocce ball league. So it was a great way to work with various groups of people and learn how to talk with them about a sport that they took very seriously, even though it was just a municipal league. So, I think as we'll see in the rest of our conversation today, communication is a key. And I think, learning how to communicate with folks just about a random sport really, really sort of was important early in the career.
Okay, awesome. Sounds like a great bit of experience. And it's a good segue for our next question. I love to start out all my interviews by just asking our guests to tell us about your career path, how you got into your current role. So maybe take us all the way back to, how you got in charge of that bocce ball league and then what happened next.
Sure. So I went to undergrad at Ohio State, and I also got my MPA there. And then I interned. I got an internship at the time with the city of Dublin, Ohio, in sports administration. So that's kind of how I came up amongst the bocce ball league, and ended up helping run the tennis league there. It was like the largest municipal tennis league in the Central Ohio area at the time, which was very fun. Helped with basketball, softball, all sorts of sports. Sports was sort of my passion. Obviously, we talked about Ohio State football before, so I was really into that. But while I was there and doing my MPA, I was fortunate that a city management internship opened up in Dublin, and I sort of jumped at that opportunity and just really enjoyed it. I worked with Sarah Ott, who's, I believe, out in Colorado now, who was my manager at the time of the internship, and really enjoyed that. So it really led to my current career path. Also worked with Michelle Crandall, who's in Hilliard, Ohio now as well. So both of those were very influential folks to me. And after my MPA, I was lucky to land a job with everyone's favorite podcast host, Lauren Palmer, in Parkville, Missouri. Had a lot of fun there. I know our episode today is a little bit leaning on the Parks and Rec moments, and we had a great time there, and some fun Parks and Rec moments as well. But really learned a lot in Parkville. Just obviously be able to involved in all sorts of stuff. Stayed on the rec side with working on the rec board, and just really being involved in all aspects of the city government, which was just great. From there, I moved on to the assistant city manager position in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. This is not the Whitefish Bay in the Gordon Lightfoot song, but it's a municipality just north of Milwaukee. I was there for about 5 years, and that's sort of where we're going to focus the podcast, I think, later. But it'll tie into where I am currently now, which is city administrator and utilities manager for the city of Plymouth, Wisconsin. And I've been here for just over 2 years.
Okay, great. Well, you've had an awesome career, Tim. You did tremendous work with me in Parkville, and it's been awesome to see your career bloom. I was definitely bittersweet to lose you from the Kansas City region, but you're doing great work now up in Wisconsin. And so our story today is about your experience in Whitefish Bay. But before we get into that, I just want to give you the opportunity to tell us more about Plymouth, and maybe just share one exciting project or initiative that you're currently working on.
Sure. So Plymouth, Wisconsin is the cheese capital of the world. It's estimated that 15% of all cheese consumed in the United States passes through Plymouth, which is pretty cool. We have 4 major cheese companies here, including the headquarters of Sargento, Sartori, Masters Gallery, who does like private label brands, and a facility for Great Lakes cheese. We've got a population of about 8,900, beautiful town down, thriving businesses, wonderful neighborhoods. And as any, city official, right? I can't just pick one project. So I've got a couple that I'm going to touch on.
Okay.
We recently completed a housing study to determine sort of the needs to support our expanding industries, and including some of those cheese companies. And somewhat related, we opened our 7th tax increment district, which is going to support some new single-family housing units that we're going to be partnering with our local EDC. They're sort of serving as developer for that to get some more cost-effective housing in the market. And we also have some multifamily units that are going to be part of that. And then lastly, which is going to be sort of tying into this podcast, we are currently working on a public-private partnership to redevelop our municipal ski hill, which is also called Nut Hill. So that's an exciting project, and we're just got the agreement finalized, and we'll be kicking that off, and construction is going to be happening and should be open next winter.
Very cool. You've got some great things going on. We may have to bring you back as a repeat guest to talk about your housing work and your ski project. This all sounds very cool.
Oh yeah, anytime.
All right, but today we're going to rewind your professional clock a little bit and talk about the real Ice Town. So let me just tee it up here. Many of our ELGL Members and GovLove listeners are fans of the popular TV show Parks and Recreation, and they will get the Icetown reference right away. But for others, I'll set a little context. The Icetown storyline was a significant part of character Ben Wyatt's backstory in the show. When Ben was 18, he was elected mayor of his hometown in Minnesota, and in his youthful enthusiasm, he initiated a project to build a winter sports complex called Icetown. The project was a financial disaster, leading to hilarity, Ben's impeachment from office, and the unfortunate nickname that haunted him for years, the Ice Clown. So, Tim, you've got a real life story that maybe isn't quite as dramatic, but mirrors some of the elements of that story. So, tell us a little bit about the concept for this winter sports park in Whitefish Bay and how it originated.
Yeah, and the Parks and Rec reference is pretty spot on, right? You've got a really neat project that things could go really well, and in this case, they probably didn't go quite as poorly as they did in the Parks and Rec episode, but they certainly didn't go as well as we thought they were going to go, and there were certainly challenges, but a lot of good came out of it as well. Um, you know, so this project, what it was in this case a local winter club nonprofit looked at bringing sort of a public-private partnership to Whitefish Bay during the winter of 2019. So the group submitted a proposal to basically utilize a full-size NHL outdoor ice rink and a chiller at a local park called Cahill Square Park in Whitefish Bay. The proposed rink would really be installed over 6 of the existing tennis courts, and the goal was to have it sort of in place between mid-November and mid-March. In addition, it would be used for hockey practice by the Winter Club. The idea is that they didn't have enough practice time at their other rinks. So they're bringing this rink outdoor close to home where a lot of their members reside in the community to allow for additional practice time. And then in the off time, it would be allowed for open skate for the community. So then you'd have this great community asset.
I mean, this sounds like a pretty appealing public-private partnership for an underutilized asset in winter. So just tell us more. What was the reaction from the governing body?
Yeah, and I think agreed. It was obviously a appealing partnership, and I think for the most part, the governing body was really interested in the concept. I think the original timeline was really quick, presented by the Winter Club. It really wasn't feasible to get everything done, get some feedback from the community, initial feedback, and to make sure the village was covered in an agreement. So the idea was to move forward, but let's take our time looking through some of these issues. Eventually, an agreement was signed at the end of 2019, but that was to get it ready for winter 2020, 2021.
Okay, so it took a little slower approach to the rollout. What were some of the key provisions of that partnership agreement?
Yeah, I think most importantly, the agreement that was signed at the end of 2019 capped that village capital cost at $74,000, whereas the Winter Club's sort of contribution for capital was estimated to be around $350,000 at the time. And then there was a 50-50 split on operations. Originally estimated to be, I think, around $60,000, but overall, I think it actually ended up being a little bit lower. It was more like $30,000. So the Winter Club was really going to be the ones also purchasing the equipment, the Zamboni, the rink, the chilling equipment, etc. And then as part of the agreement, the inspection and repairs of the courts, so to be damaged, would be the responsibility then of that Winter Club. Also, I think important to note it was a 1-year term, at least for the initial agreement, to see if they want to continue it the following year.
Okay. And what was that negotiating process like with the project advocates?
Yeah, it was an interesting process. So I would say one of the primary advocates was a gentleman, sort of volunteer for the Winter Club, who just has a heart of gold, right? Truly wants to do the right thing, wanted to try to do something great for the community, had this great idea, helped bring it forward. However, I think just like in many organizations, you need those that come up with the idea from the concept, and then you need those folks that can take that idea and implement. And I think the group had some of that, but they seem to be relying on this gentleman's experience and their general hockey experience, which I think is a little bit different than construction and ice rinks and chillers, etc. So really, the volunteer that was sort of leading this process seemed to know everything and had a guy for everything. The village board in Whitefish Bay would ask questions, right? will the rink damage the courts? And the response was no. They will protect the courts. Some foreshadowing, they did not protect the courts. Will the chiller make noise? Some, but it's not bad. I know a guy who knows chillers. Are the chiller chemicals safe? Yes, of course. And then the city attorney at the time, who did a lot of environmental work, was like, yeah, no, that chemical's hazardous. Should there be a problem? There never was, but it's one of those that you just got to be a little cautious about. They would work with neighbors. They would be responsive. The rink would be open below 50 degrees. I'm going on 5 years of trying to remember some of these exact wording, but that was the essence. Really, a lot of the passion for this project, which is obviously important to bring these forward, outweighed some of the facts.
Mm-hmm. But eventually, the city did make a deal. The project moved forward. I think you said it was initially just for a 1-year term.
Yeah, it was just a 1-year term to get started.
And did the club push back on that? How much of a term were they initially asking for?
To be honest, I don't recall
Don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. But they seem to be okay with the 1-year term. With the idea is that, hey, we can renew it after 1 year, and I think the logic was, hey, everyone's going to love this ice rink. It'll be a no-brainer to bring it back.
Okay, so far the story's going great, Tim. Like, you've made a deal, you've got an agreement in place, protecting the city. So, what are some of the challenges that came up in that first year of initial operation?
Yeah, and there were certainly some, and I say before I get to the challenges, there were a lot of good that did come from the project. So the timing worked in a way that when the rink opened in like November of 2020, it was like peak COVID-19, right? And people had an outdoor activity to enjoy, and when it was in operation and available, I think the community really did enjoy the rink. But as we've kind of alluded to, there were certainly some challenges, and I think number one for the club is the project was really plagued with cost overruns. Fortunately, the city's capital contribution was capped, but my understanding is those capital costs from the Winter Club ended up going way over. I don't know the exact amount, but that's my understanding. The impact to the neighbors was really understated. This is not like what we're going to talk about in a little bit in Plymouth, where we had a ski hill and it was a ski hill. This was previously a tennis courts that would have been used in the summer till 8 or 9 p.m. till it got dark, and in the winter it was really unutilized. And in the Milwaukee area, it gets dark really early in the winter. You're talking 4:30 p.m. So there was lights and noise concerns that continued to happen, even after reminders to the group. Sort of the third challenge that really popped up, the chiller was both noisier than expected and never worked quite correctly. So you already had the light concerns that we were talking about from these new lights that were put on to help, illuminate the rink. But then, where you have residents complaining about sound and vibrations, even after sort of a fence went up to, try to hide the chiller. And then you get the community members that are going to be reaching out about the lights and the noise to staff and council members. And it ended up being constant reminders to the group about the agreement and that we need to follow the agreement. And then the chiller it was a used chiller, is my understanding. It never quite worked correctly. So the idea was that this rink would be in use anytime it's below 50 degrees, which in the winter in Wisconsin, it's right almost all the time, but it can get up there. But it never worked quite correctly. So, maybe at 40 degrees and below it worked, but at 50 degrees, it was really more of a pond. Other challenges, ice time was supposed to be 50-50, and I think they did a decent job. We did a decent job working on that, but there was often last minute changes just due to staffing or Winter Club like usage needs, and communication, which probably ended up being the biggest challenge in this whole thing, was an issue. Games were being scheduled without knowledge, which led to increased traffic concerns and parking concerns for residents that were really not anticipated.
So when you say the original deal was 50-50, like 50% for club activities, 50% open for general public?
Correct. Yeah, that was the idea.
Okay, but then that scheduling sometimes got disrupted.
Yeah, I think it was just there was last minute changes, or it was tough. I think they had a part-time staff person that tried to be there as much as they could, but sometimes they couldn't make it, and so schedules got changed. So yeah, it was a challenge. I think they did a decent job providing ice time, but it was often last minute items.
Yeah, I do. Shout out for people like you, Tim, and others in the recreation universe who manage these like club activity schedules, youth sports scheduling. I mean, those things are a monster. And like, if a team drops out and you got to redo the schedule, I definitely empathize with how complicated that can be. And I can see how that could have been disruptive in a situation like this when there's an expectation from the public of shared use.
Yeah, I think it was a challenge, and I eventually, right, the public, we were able to get the word out on when we came up with hours and times, and the public was able to be involved. So we were able to get that put together. Other items, just things you never think you're going to be working on, right? I never knew I was going to be coming up with ice rink rules. That was kind of a fun project to work on. So there aren't a ton of other in our area municipal outdoor ice rinks, but all that being said, I would say we managed with the Winter Club to keep the rink open and operating all winter. I mean, I think for those that attended, it was really neat, and it really did bring a lot of smiles to folks' faces, even though there was some significant stress from the staff and the village board level on the back end, and I'm sure the Winter Club as well to make it happen. After some of these challenges arised, the village board, directed staff to do a local resident survey for the folks around the park, and heard enough complaints that they did end up exercising their option to end the agreement after 1 year, with the caveat that, hey, we'll welcome it back if there's improvements to communication. These lights are being turned off when they're supposed to, and some of the other issues, sound, were going to be addressed. The Winter Club chose not to submit the following year. And while this was a park in the past, right, I think the village board was thinking like, hey, it was never, when people purchased their homes here, they didn't think it was going to be an ice rink, so we have to be cognizant of that. And then the other, I would say, final challenge to this whole process was, even after the agreement ended in early 2021, the chiller was left in the park until I think, mid 2024.
Got it. So if you had it to do over again, is there anything you would have handled differently?
Yeah, I think the group did have some public info sessions in midsummer of 2019. I'm kind of looking back through my notes. And there was a public hearing at the village board level in like September of 2019. But by the time the rink began in the winter of 2020, it was really a year away. And I think really continued public information and updates throughout the process would have been important. We posted some pictures on Facebook, but really, keeping a group or a small group of residents updated and informed probably could have, saved some headaches later on. Really maybe providing some contact information on who should be reached out to. And obviously with something new, you're never going to solve every problem, and you're not going to make everyone happy. And sometimes you need to make changes on the fly. And I think working with neighbors to solve concerns happened to a point prior to the rink opening. But after the rink opening, it seemed like village staff was sort of becoming the middleman to put out fires. We would get contacted. We would then, reach out to the Winter Club, and working more directly with the neighbors probably would have helped the group build that public trust moving forward. So, hey, next year, maybe we can do this better, right? So you had this sort of discrepancy between what the neighbors were saying and what the Winter Club wanted, and it created a lot of frustration. And particularly when folks are not being heard, that's when they're going to be coming to your village board and expressing that frustration.
Yeah, for sure. Some great lessons learned there. I have to say, though, objectively, you and I'm sure others were involved did a good job of negotiating that operating agreement. It sounds like you really put in some smart provisions there to mitigate the risk for the city. And it's unfortunate it didn't last beyond that initial 1 year term, but smart that the city had the ability to say after a year, like, hey, this isn't really working for us and we're going to do something different.
Yeah, I think that worked out really well. And kudos to the village board at the time, who really to make the risk and the chance on this project, but at the same time willing to also listen to their constituents saying, maybe this wasn't exactly what we signed up for. We need to get some more information. The agreement I thought was, well put together, really protected the city. I think restoration probably would have been something I would have, looking back on, right? You're not thinking about the chiller only being there 1 year, but something you want to include in future agreements. Rules and hours, that's something we were coming up last minute, but, once you come up with those, then moving forward, yeah, you have them in the future. So we were kind of ready to go there moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. So you hinted at it, but what about this experience is influencing your current work in Plymouth?
Yeah, so in Plymouth, we're working on a really neat and I would say somewhat similar project. Over the past couple of years, we've been doing planning, and then implementation is going to start really starting today, moving forward into next winter. So a local nonprofit is working to raise $2.3 million to reestablish a local municipal ski hill called Nut Hill. That's with two T's, which was a small local municipal ski hill. It has not been in operation since 2014. There was an accident caused by faulty equipment, and at that time, the city chose to not moving forward with some really high cost repairs. So the group is 80% of the way with the funding. There's some major upgrades to get it operational. They're going to be installing tubing lanes. They're going to be doing a magic carpet. The primary difference, I think, from this item to the one in Whitefish Bay was this was a ski hill in the past. It hasn't been functioning for a period of time, but at least people have been used to skiing on it previously. And if there is snow, people can still go down in snow and ski, but people just haven't made snow since 2014. I say the only other note is the ice rink in Whitefish Bay was a free amenity to the public when it was open. And this is there'd be a small fee, I think, for the ski hill. But just at the end of this past November, we did finalize an agreement with a local nonprofit called Cheese Capital Winter Park to rehabilitate and operate the hill, and really emphasize from the start communication from residents. So that's some of those lessons learned from Whitefish Bay. And also needing to work through some of these items with professional support. Right? They've got those idea people to bring this idea forward, but how can you partner with folks that have been in the business and help implement that? So that group has really sort of taken that to heart. They've had like 3 open house meetings. They've had numerous council meetings and been to present, I think, to council and plan commission several times. On some suggestion from staff, I met or called directly one-on-one with all the impacted neighbors in advance. Again, you're not going to make everyone happy, right? It hasn't been a ski hill since 2014. You're going to have some folks that are going to be concerned about traffic and noise and lighting. But at least the goal was to at least allow residents to be heard. They agreed to plant new trees for those that were removed. So overall, the group has done a really nice job. Sort of on that implementation side, they have a volunteer who has a degree in ski hill management, is my understanding, and previously managed another local ski hill. So the plans and policies, right? He has some true background experience in that. The group hired an engineering firm to lead the design changes on the hill to prove where the water runoff's going to go. They have lighting design to prove where the light's going to be shining, instead of just sort of saying, hey, this isn't going to be a problem. They've got the data behind that to show where the light is, how noisy this snowmaking equipment will be. Obviously, this is a little bit of a scale beyond the ice rink project, but at the same time, I think it was important to have all those technical details in advance for council to be, ready to go.
Yeah, there's some great nuggets of wisdom there. You definitely emphasize the importance of public communication, and we definitely talk about that a lot on GovLove and with ELGL, and just valuing the importance of that professional expertise in making some of these decisions too, I think is really important to highlight.
Yeah, totally. And I think very similar to the project in Whitefish Bay, our Common Council really has protected ourselves with an agreement with the Ski Hill organization. We certainly think they're going to do a tremendous job, but we've limited our contribution per year for the Ski Hill. They're going to be doing all of the running at the Ski Hill, right? The city's going to be left out, so we're not going to be worried about staffing, part-time positions, et cetera. So we have a limited contribution. I believe that's like around $12,000 per year, which what it used to cost for the city to run the Ski Hill without all of these upgrades. And then there's no real capital contribution from the city. And as we mentioned, often some of these unknown capital costs ended up being really significant for the Winter Club in Whitefish Bay. So we're sort of insulating ourselves from that. And of course, we're planning to have direct conversations. So we know traffic will be a concern at the Ski Hill. We've got this new asset that hasn't been used in years. So we're going to have to be, ready to work on the fly and, make changes as needed or plan for future upgrades. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to give our Ski Hill group a plug. Is that okay?
Oh, please do. That's what we're here
All right.
for.
So if you're ever interested and you're headed to Wisconsin, the Ski Hill group is the Cheese Capital Winter Park LLC, but their webpage is nuthillwinterpark.com, and that's nutt-hillwinterpark.com.
Okay, check it out. Come for some cheese and some skiing.
That's right.
Sounds awesome. Well, Tim, let's do a segment called Where Are They Now? Do you know what the advocates for the Winter Sports Club project in Whitefish Bay, what are they up to now? How did they rebound from the experience?
Yeah, and I think they rebounded well. And I don't have all the details, but I've seen a lot of things pop up recently. So they did not submit a proposal for winter 2021 in Whitefish Bay, and I don't know if there was bad blood, but certainly there was some frustration from the winter club group at that time. But they definitely have rebounded, and they have opened a community rink in a neighboring city. And I'd say the key caveat, and I've been doing some digging before this podcast, is that the rink is now in sort of a temporary indoor facility, really away from single family homes, that should eliminate that light concern, the noise concerns, weather concerns. It looks like they've hammered out the rules and hours. So I'm certainly looking to check it out this winter with the kiddo. So I think it's a great bounce back story for them.
That's awesome. So both sides of that public-private partnership to learn some things and grew from the experience, and it's influencing some other projects and communities. And that's what we're all about at ELGL, sharing our wisdom to make all of our communities better. Tim, is there anything else you want to share with us about this story or about what's going on in Plymouth before we wrap up?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to obviously tell the story and give a plug to the Cheese Capital Winter Park group. I think it's, a lot, as you mentioned, a lot of lessons learned on both sides, and both groups ended up better for it. And just also wanted to mention for those listening, I do really credit Lauren for really helping shape who I am as city administrator today early on in my career. So certainly really appreciate it and really appreciate the time.
Your check's in the mail, Tim. Tim, I have one more question for you. On a personal note, will you please move back to Kansas City, hire me to be your assistant city manager somewhere in the region, and fulfill my lifelong ambition of working for a former early career professional?
Oh, man. Well, right now I'll say I'm very thrilled to be in Plymouth. I'm fortunate to have excellent council and awesome staff. I couldn't ask for a better situation. However, we do really miss the Kansas City area, so you can never say never.
All right. I'm thrilled that you are happy and doing great work in Plymouth. Listeners will know I've had several former colleagues, interns on the podcast who have grown far beyond my tutelage and are doing incredible things in their new roles elsewhere. So it's really fun for me to get to shine a spotlight on you and the work that you are doing up in Wisconsin. And I love this story. I think it's really relatable for our listeners who are working on public-private partnerships. And I think you gave them some good suggestions of things to be thinking about to make sure they are protecting their communities and getting the best outcomes on their projects.
Yeah, no, I certainly appreciate it. And obviously happy to chat with anyone if they're ever working toward a project like this. I think it's worth the risk, right? You've got a great potential community partnership. You just got to make sure you're covering your bases.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for joining the GovLove podcast today, Tim. And our last question, if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
Well, given the recent Ohio State victory in the Rose Bowl, I'm going to say Hang On Sloopy.
Okay, Hang On Sloopy, Ohio State fan favorite. By the time our episode here goes to air, I think the playoffs will be done and we will know the outcome of the rest of Ohio State's games. So I wish you luck and hope at that point we'll be able to celebrate the big national championship victory.
Sounds good.
All right. Listeners, that ends our episode for today. Thank you so much to our guest, Tim Blakesley. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. You can reach us at elgl.org/GovLove or on social media at GovLove Podcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
Snoopy, I don't care what your daddy do, 'cause you know, Snoopy girl, I'm in love with you. And so I say now, hang on, Snoopy, Snoopy, hang on. Hang on, Snoopy, Snoopy, hang on. Snoopy wears a red